I already know the comments I'm going to get. People are going to make rude comments that this video is too long for a simple build. It shouldn't be more than 10 minutes long. Well then fine, make your own. This isn't for you, so please pass. This is for people mainly newer to woodworking, still learning some stuff, because I am going to go into detail my crazy madness, how I come up with things to build without having any measurements. So I'm basically starting from scratch. And a lot of the people out there made this type of battery charging organization station, if you will. They basically would put a piece of wood, nail a piece of wood, and do that, and that's what your tool rests on. I don't want that. I want something a little nicer. I like the way this came out. It's got a little style. It's got curves to it. So this is how I come up with my design. And my intent is, I'm going in detail, so if you follow along, take notes. I hope you're confident enough, have enough knowledge to go out and do one yourself and come up with a little better design than most of the people out there just made a straight shelf with straight little hangers, boom, done. So this is the madness I go through step by step, how I come up with something that I don't have any measurements, anything for. Now that I have this, I keep my measurements, keep my little plans, and if I ever need to build it or if somebody wants one built, I have a reference to go to and can duplicate it. Get pen and pad ready, and we're going to begin right after this. I'm Rick, and this Shut the heck up, you stinking roosters. Nail that for your sanity. This is the shack. Hello and welcome back to the shack. This wasn't something I really wanted to do. I was trying to get rid of half my tools. That was unsuccessful, so I'm kind of stuck with them. With that, I decided I need to clear off this shelf because they were all taking up space here and put them on something that they were dedicated and a little more organized and actually more accessible. So I'm going to go through how I came up with this design, how I came up with my measurements. So if you want to build something, you can actually build something like this, eliminate this part, bring the drawer up to here, and you'd have a nice little shelf about this tall, and you have room for 4 drills or impacts or other tools, whatever you have that might fit. I'm going to readjust camera. We're going to go over here, and I'm going to tell you how I came up with my initial measurements. Depending on how many tools you have, I would suggest lining them all up and figuring out, do you want one long shelf? Or in my case, I chose to separate the drills from the impacts. However you want to do it, line your tools up and figure out your spacing. I was considering putting a divider in between, but once I kind of set them up there, I like no divider, I like the open concept. So I chose not to do that. Completely up to you if you want to use 1/2 inch or 3/4. The particle board, you can flex it a little bit, but these aren't that heavy, so it's still fine. But I think if I had the wood, I would just use 3/4 all the way through. So my initial thought was, again, with the divider, so I decided to put a 3/4 inch piece of plywood in here, but the tools up together like that, and that was my distance. Hindsight, since I didn't put the divider in, I would have used just a 1/2 inch piece of wood, and that would be, I think, 4 inches from center to center of the tool. In my case, because I use 3/4, it's 4 1/4 inches from center line to center line. So I just kind of sketched up something quick on a piece of paper, and I'm writing down notes. Center line of the tool, 4 1/4 inches. Going off the largest of my drills, and this is the DeWalt hammer drill. My center line to center line of each tool is 4 1/4 inches. How wide is each slot going to be? I've kind of figured it out where I want it to rest on, and if I got any wider than that, it would slide past here. So about right there is the right point. Got my calipers, and it's 2 inches. So I write that on my notes. Slots are 2 inches wide. How deep am I going to have the shelf? Where the slot's going to hit right about here, so the tool will slide in and hit right here, just above the trigger. So I'm going to go off that measurement. From that to the end where I have my jaws all the way closed is right about 4 inches. So I want a little clearance, so it's 4.5 inches from this point to the front. From that same point to the back of my tool is right at 5 inches from here to here. So I'm going to add another 1/4 inch on that so I have a little clearance because I want this to set in. So my overall length is 9.5 inches. That gives me a 1/4 inch distance in the front, 1/4 inch distance in the back. So I write those measurements down, 9.5 inches overall from the back of the shelf to where the trigger hits, 4.25 from the front of the shelf in to where the trigger hits again, 5.25 inches. That's how the shelf is going to lay out. So I go get a piece of wood, found out close from my center line, just kind of eyeballed it, drew a line, and CL, that's my center line. So I went from that center line over, because the distance between each tool is 4.25 inches, I went from center line over 2.1/8 of an inch. So from this line over to this line is 2.1/8 of an inch. From this line to the left or your right, 2.1/8 of an inch. I wrote tool on that line because that's where the tool is going to slide into. From this line over again, 2.1/8 of an inch, which is here, I wrote divider because that's going to divide this tool. And since I have 4, I need one more tool, so I went an additional 2.1/8 inch over and drew a line and wrote tool because that's going to be where the tool rests in each one of these slots. With that done, since they are 2-inch wide slots, each tool line I went on either side 1 inch, drew a line, and that's the width of the slot. And I did me a little line up here, so I knew from this line to this line is 2 inches, that's my slot. So I don't cut the wrong line, because I would probably cut the wrong line, not even knowing it. My next step was to go from the front in, from the front of it going in is 5.25 inches. I did a little mark, 5.25, and from the back of the shelf in, I went 4.25. So I made sure this was overall width of 9.5 inches. Did the measurements, they came out good, so I'm good to go. I didn't screw up a measurement there. So that is the end of the slot where my tool is going to come in, hit, and rest on. Because I want a 2-inch wide slot, I got my tool, set it at 1 inch, came in from the 5.25 mark in 1 inch, set my tool there on that mark, and drew me a half moon. That's my slot. And I wrote on here slot, and I just squiggle line. This is all going to be cut out. So I did that on all 4 slots. This is the layout of the tool rest. This is where all the drills are going to set on. Depending on how many you have, on your last tool, this is your mark for the center line of the tool. You go over 1 inch on either side. That's your slot. From that slot line, go over an additional 1.1/8. As I did on this side, I went over 1.1/8. Now that 1.1/8 will give you enough room to slide this into a dado slot that is 3/16 of an inch deep. So if you're going to go with a deeper dado, at least a 1/4 inch, this measurement on either end will still work. 1.1/8 from your last tool slot on either side will still accommodate at least a 1/4 inch deep dado. And you'll still have room from the side that the tool won't hit. You're fine. Now this can be a one-size-fits-all. Your impacts and your drills can fit on this design. So if you just have a few tools, you can make one shelf and they will all fit. I just happen to have a few extra ones that I was really trying just to get rid of, so I chose to separate them. So I have the drills on top, impacts on bottom. My overall depth here, instead of being 9.5 inches for the drills, for my impacts, it was just 6.5 inches. And from here to the slot on the impacts is only 1.75 of an inch because they just got little stubby noses. And that's the only difference. I have both shelves laid out for my impacts and my drills. Now I go to the drill press, drill this out, go to my bandsaw, cut these out, and we can move on to the next step. you saw at the end of that clip, I was using my biscuit tool to glue up 2 pieces of plywood. I am using every little bitty piece I can find around here to try to build this without having to go buy another sheet of plywood. The size of my shelving unit are the same height as my tallest shelf, and that's 9.5 inches. That's the one that holds the drills on. So the sides are cut to the same height as this. In a perfect scenario, I would probably use 1/2 inch plywood for the back and add a 1/2 inch to each side, set that over, and do like a rabbet in the back and set that 1/2 inch plywood. I don't have enough wood to do what I would like, or what I would normally like to do. This is like a Frankenstein build, so I'm doing what I can do with what I have available. So the sides on my shelves are 9.5 inches, same as this, and they are the same height as the bottom shelf that the drawer will go into. So I got these 2 pieces cut at 9.5 inches. I got another 2 pieces, the same, 1 piece to 3/4, 1 piece a 1/2 inch, cut at 9 inches for the bottom. The only difference is my plywood was a little short, so I wasn't able to cut it to the 16 3/4 of an inch. I cut it down to 16.5. I'm just going to butt joint the bottom. I'm going to glue and nail it because I don't have enough to do a dado, or basically dado would be a rabbet joint. I took my wood and I laid it upon the sheet, this piece of 3/8 inch particle board I have down there, put the 2 sides up, and I laid the battery chargers on it because I don't want the battery chargers to lay this way. I want to mount them vertically because I want this shelf to be freed up so I can put batteries on there that need to be charged, put my tablet, put my phone, whatever else I need to put on here to charge. I'm also going to add a little charging port here that I can plug in USB and USB-Cs into to charge my various things I have. So when I laid the battery chargers on the ground there, trying to figure out the best way to arrange them. And as you see here, what I ended up is putting the Milwaukee, since it's the biggest and the bulkiest, sitting there, and I have the Porter cable and the DeWalt on top of each other. And I had to offset them because I wanted to make sure that the batteries don't interfere with one another when I'm charging. And I wanted to make sure I had enough space in the bottom to grab onto the battery to lift it up. I ended up having the back be 11 inches from the top of the shelf to the top of the backrest there. Now, if I would have had enough plywood, I would at least made that back part there out of 3/4 inch plywood. But since I didn't, what I'm going to do is when I get this shelving unit built, I'm going to mount that 3/8 of an inch piece of particle board on the back, glue and nail it. Then I'm going to cut another piece, 9 inch, the same width of that, and I'm going to 45 it, and that's going to be the top part of my cleat system. And I will use another piece, probably about like this, to screw into the steel shelving unit here, and that shelf will set right on there to mount that to, so that 2 3/8 of an inch thick pieces will now equal a 3/4 inch thick piece. Now I can screw my chargers into that and have enough or sufficient amount of area back there to screw into without the screw sticking out. If you can, use a piece of 3/4 inch plywood on the back, or if you can, use a piece of 3/4 through the whole length of the back. It's up to you. Having that thought in mind, my 2 pieces for the sides, I measured down 11 inches, make my first mark, scribe a line, and since I'm using a piece of 3/4 inch, I go from that line down 3/4 of an inch, scribe a line so I know this is where I'm going to line this up to. Plus, when I do my dados, I know where I'm going to be cutting my dados. Then from that line down, I'm going 3 inches because I have a 3-inch gap between this and the support shelf that the drills will set on. Scribe a line. I'm using 1/2 inch particle board, so I go over 1/2 inch, scribe another line. Again, that's the line I want to follow, and that's the line that I'm going to be putting the dado in. So from that line down to the next shelf, 7 3/4 of an inch down, scribe me a line, 1/2 inch particle board, go over 1/2 inch, scribe another line. That's my next dado. From that line down, I go 3 inches for my support shelf for the impacts. Same thing, scribe a line, go over 1/2 inch, scribe another line. That's another dado. Then from that point down, another 7 3/4 of an inch. Scribe a line, and that bottom shelf there is just 1/2 inch particle board. So I go down 1/2 inch scribe a line, and that's where I'm at, because I don't know exactly how big I'm making my drawer yet for the batteries. So that's what we're going to do next. Let me gather up some wood, and we're going to start designing the drawer. How I came up with my dimensions on the drawer, I know the shelving unit is 16.5 inches width. This is really close to 16.5. I'm probably about a 32nd shy. So it is kind of tight, but it does slide in up pretty good. How I came up with the dimensions of this, as you see, the batteries fit in. These are pretty loose. There's room for the side to side except for the big one. 5 amp hour battery, you got more room. It's just this big one is very limited because it is the largest of the batteries. Did my measurements, and what I came up with, every tool I can now get underneath it to lift it out. It's got that little lip, I can grab it to lift out. The depth of the drawer is 2 7/8. Overall width is 3 1/8. And I made them short because I'll be able to grab it on the side without it being inside the drawer, so the drawer is shorter than the batteries. It was done on purpose. The back of the drawer, again, I took the biggest battery I had, and I wanted it to be just a little bit above it, so this piece here is 5 3/4 of an inch. So you got 3 1/8 for the sides, 5 3/4 for the front. I have a 3/8 of an inch piece of wood on the bottom. I didn't want a flimsy bottom because the batteries are somewhat heavy, so I thought 3/8 was probably the thinnest I could get away with. So it is a rabbet on the bottom here, 3/8 of an inch deep, and I went just about 3/16 of an inch, almost half the width of the particle board here. But that's how I came up with the size of the drawer. So how I divided this up was very simple. The inside dimension, dead center, and from that center point again to the edge here, another center. So these are equally divided, and each line I went on either side of that line 3/16 of an inch, so I can make a mark for the Dado for a 3/8 of an inch piece of particle board for the divider here. That is inset with a 3/16 of an inch deep Dado. The ends are butt jointed. These are inset with dados. Bottom's inset with a rabbet. And I'll talk about this in a little bit. My next step was, once I got that done, is to figure out the measurements to divide the individual compartments up to fit each battery in. As you see in this picture, there are some people that say that's fine, they could leave it like that. At least the batteries are separated. But personally, I don't like them just sitting there. I want them even more organized, and I want each row to isolate each individual battery. I'm weird that way. It drives me nuts sometimes. So this is how I came up with the dividing method. I knew I wanted certain batteries in certain rows. I want the DeWalt's all here because I only have a few of these batteries. So I took my largest battery, I sat it against the back here. From this angle, this is the front. And I took my little Bridge City Tool ruler and I set it against the battery and I made a little mark. And then I measured about a 1/16 of an inch up because I wanted this to have a little wiggle room. I didn't want it extremely snug. Put my square on there. Then I took my pencil and I scribed a line straight across. Then I went up 3/8 of an inch, scribed another line, and that was the first dado for my first divider. And then I put the battery up along that line as close as I could get it and try to get it as plumb as possible. And the same thing, kind of rest this on there and just moved it up a little bit, more than likely a 1/16. Did my mark and did the same thing. Scribed the line across, went up 3/8 of an inch, scribed the line across. So now I have the mark where I want my two dividers to go in. Now the three inner dividers are all the same length because they are 3/16 of an inch extra on either end for the dado that I put in the front and the back of the drawer here. But the sides here, they fit inside the front and back. They're butt jointed right here. So they're not as long. So how I did the two ends, I'll show you a little trick I did for the ends here to make sure that I got them lined up so the dados would line up. The centers are easy. You set your stop, do your dado, get the other piece, do your dado, but make sure you don't do the wrong end. So what I did before I painted this, the inside, so I knew that these two sides would match, I put, like, for example, M on this side, M on this side, and a P on this side, a P on this side, an X on this side, X on this side, and then again, maybe a C on this side and a C on this side. So I knew which sides met each other and which sides were going to have the dados done when I got everything lined up, so I wouldn't flip it by accident, get the wrong side and screw everything up. And I also put arrows on all of them pointing the same way, either the front or back. Just put an arrow here, arrow there on every side. So I made sure I kept them facing around the same way, because if these are facing like this and they're all the same length, like these three, and I set them this way in there, I'm fine. But if I happen to flip one and I have the arrow going that way and on this one the arrow going that way, and I put them back, all of a sudden now they're shifted. So when I would do the dado, I would make sure the arrow was always facing the same direction, and I put letters on every side, so I made sure I cut the dado on the matching letter side. It's kind of a lot, but I have to do that because I have to make sure I do it correct. Otherwise, none of this would have lined up, and I would have been all stressed out, have to recut everything 10 times because I kept messing up. So that's how I have to do things to make sure I stay consistent. So with that, I'll show you how I did the ends to make sure and to guarantee that I lined up the dados equally on my dado cuts. So this is the inside, and I got the mark for this side. So this is how it sits in there. Now this is flush with the inside. This got a dado 3/16 of an inch on either side. So what I'm going to do, we want to dado this side, the inside. So I'm going to flip them, put some two-sided tape, and I already have this set. So when I put it together, right, that's flush right there. Hold this, set that on there. It doesn't move. Perfectly centered. Just a little bit of tape on both sides just to hold them. See, what I want to do, I want to get about half of it off, set it on there where I know I want it, then push down. And I have this already set, so I'm just going to center it here. Now, I got tabs, I can pull those out. They don't move on me. Push it down. Double check. Looks good. Looks good. Perfect. And there we go. So all I have to do is I'll get it set with my stop bar here. I'll line that up, do it, flip it over, do it. With this thing basically done, the batteries fit. I've corrected a couple of mistakes. I can disassemble this and do my final assembly and glue it up, and we're done. While this is drying, I can go back over here to my shelf unit and I can make my final marks, because now I know the final dimension of my drawer. The front is the widest, so this is what I base that measurement off of, and I want 1/8 of an inch clearance on the top, and I want 1/8 of an inch clearance off the bottom here. So this is 5 3/4 of an inch at 1/8 on top and bottom. Now my overall opening for my drawer is going to be 6 inches. So I can go over here. My last mark I have on there is the shelf just below the impact drivers, that 1/2 inch shelf. Remember, 7 3/4 of an inch. In between them two, I have a mark. Then I go down 1/2 inch mark, and that's the dado for that divider. From that point, I go down 6 inches, make my mark, and go down an additional 3/4 of an inch, and that's for the final piece of the bottom to go on the shelf unit. But I'm not done, because I have to figure out how I'm going to mount this into the shelf unit. I don't want this to just sit on the bottom and slide in and out. I want it to have some type of a guide, some type of a runner. So I decided on the same concept. Woodworkers use runners for jigs on their table saw. I'm going to do the same. I went over to my wood supply here and I have a bucket of cutoff pieces from my rustic flags that I build. Put a link to those up there. This is solid red oak. I have seen church pews at a church in their parking lot for years. I finally went up, asked, being outside, would they be willing to get rid of them? I didn't care if I was going to pay for them. I was just trying to reclaim some lumber. Well, come to find out, they said I could have them if I wanted, because that weekend they were having a dumpster arrive and they're going to load them all up and off to the dump they would go. I said, well, I'll take as much as I can. And as soon as I started tearing into it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is solid red oak. I'll put a link to that video also up here. Oh man, score. I'm going nuts. I'm tearing these apart, stacking the wood. And you watch that video. If I was going to buy linear foot, I probably had a couple $1,000s in wood there. Big score, so I have very special projects I use on that wood, and the American flag is one. So this is a cutoff piece from that, and it's right about 3/4 of an inch. I just eyeball it, center it on here. I kind of get a measurement because I want an equal measurement. I don't want a 32nd or something. I want some easy inch, 1 1/8, 1 1/4, whatever. I set it on there and I decided to go by 1 1/8, and this is right at 1 1/4. On the side of the shelf unit, I know if I set this here at about 1 1/8, I got an 1/8 of an inch clearance, so that's 1 1/4 from the bottom up. I'm going to make another mark, and that's where I'm going to scribe a line that I'm going to dado a slot in for my runner. And I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch. So I just make my mark, and now basically the shelving unit is all set with all the marks that I need. So I can focus on this, get this done, and then I can go work on the shelving unit. So I want my dado 3/16 of an inch deep. And this ended up being 3/8 of an inch here. 3/16 of an inch deep there, and this is 3/8 of an inch. Basically what I did, set this on here, scribe the line here, scribe the line here, and I'm going to reference off the back. I get my table saw, set this against the fence, bump it up till my blade was just inside that line. I ran a cut, checked the depth, raise it up till I got to 3/16 of an inch. Ran it through, 3/16 of an inch, I'm good. Flip it over, stay in the back against the fence, run this side through. Bump it over 1/8 of an inch, run it through, flip it over, run it through. Ran it through 1/8 of an inch every time till I got close to this end. Now I didn't want this loose, I wanted this to a pretty snug fit. So when I got close, fortunately the Incra has a very micro adjustment. I can literally do 1/1000th of an inch with every adjustment if I want to go there. So I got it set to where it's close, where this is almost fitting, and I was going 5/1000th of an inch each pass. Go 5/1000th of an inch, run it through, check it, 5/1000th of an inch, run it through, check it again. So I got it till this was starting to fit in, a little tight, ran it through a couple more times, and it was pushed down a little bit, it was still kind of snug, and that was fine for me because I wanted a very snug fit because this is going to be secure. Glued it up, took my mallet, seated it in. So I got the clamps, clamped it, 3 of them. Made sure it's nice and tight, a good seat. And I just got my flesh cut saw out, cut these off on both sides, flipped it over, cut the other one, same thing. But with that cut-off piece, I would use that as like a template. So when I started doing the dados and the shelf unit, when I got down to the dado for this, I'd run the 1/2 inch bit through, check it, see how far I'd go, dilate it a little bit, do it again till it got tight. One thing I didn't want to do was over adjust it where this was loose in there. I wanted it to stay tight enough where at least it would seat in all the way and it would slide but may have resistance. That was fine because once it was all done, put together, I literally fine-tuned it by taking a piece of wood with the sandpaper, ran up, down 3 or 4 times, run up, down 3 or 4 times on the top and bottom, on both sides, and then go into the shelving unit and run it on the top, push it to one side, run it on the bottom, on both sides. Slide this in till I got the feel that I wanted, where it would slide it in and out freely, but not wobbly. So let's get this assembled, glue it up for the final time, get these in, and get all the dado cuts in the shelving unit, and we'll be right back. I wanted to go one more step. I didn't want this flat. I wanted to make some lines to this. So this is how I came up with the design on the side. So as you see, I have some shape to this. It's just not square. because I didn't want just square. I wanted actually take off some wood to help with weight and give it a little style. So I just went out 5 inches, and I wanted I think it's 3 inches, right? 2 and 3/4. I was just going to do a 3-inch height here, but it ended up being 2 3/4. So it's 5 inches out. I drew me a line all the way down, and I went 2 3/4 of an inch up and drew a line, scribed a line here, basically to get the shapes here. WD-40 can. Rounded it, as you see here, rounded it, and then rounded this in, and that's how I got it. Very easy, simple. Okay, I used stuff that I have, that gave me this shape. So how I came up with the shape down here, so since the impact shelf is shorter than the drill shelf, I wanted this to come down and meet the impact shelf and be flush with it here, and then go back out to the drawer down here. So I just have a little instep right here. And what I did was, right below the shelf where the drill set, I went down 1 inch, scribed a line. From the shelf just above the impacts, I went up 1 inch and scribed a line because I wanted a little distance between both shelves before I started the step down. And just below the shelf that the impact set on, I went 1 inch, scribed a line, and just above the shelf where the drawer sits in, I went up 1 inch. So I scribed all these lines. I got 4 lines scribed. I know that the shelves here are 6.5 inches wide. So I went from the back out 6.5 inches, and from this line to this line, I scribed me a line down here. As I was sitting there looking at it, I just happened to notice a bearing that I had sitting over by my toolbox, and I thought, I could use that. So I set it here, and I just set it on the edge, and I used it to curve to meet this line here, because I went from this line to this line straight, but I didn't want it straight. I wanted the curve, so I just put that on there, outlined it a little bit, and on this side of the line, I outlined it. So I just had something to go by, a radius basically. And did the same thing here, where the 6.5 inch line scribed here and the line from 1 inch down was scribed here where they intersect. I set that there and put the curve, and the same thing on this here. So this kind of just helped me get the radius of these, and you see it fits. Got the jigsaw, cut these out, got my sander, sanded this down to the line because I cut just prior to the line. I didn't want to cut on the line or past it. I cut just before it, then I could sand down to it. Made sure these curves are smooth, and mainly I sanded this area, and I put the shelf in flush with the back, and I sanded it till I got flush here and here. So I knew this was good, and it just refined, if you will, the profile here. Made sure I was right along that line, made sure these were smooth curves in and out, and that was the profile here. So all I had to do once this was done, set it next to the other side, get it all set up, draw in here the same profile, cut just before the line, clamp them together, and use my trim router bit and flush cut this so they are equal patterns on both sides. Yeah, I don't know if you caught that or not, so I think I will address that before I get some comments. In my mind, this profile was more critical. So once I made the cut and I started sanding down to my line, I put the shelf in here flush with the back, and I sanded it till this was flush. Both shelves were flush. Then I put the two sides together, marked it, cut the other side out, clamped them together, and used my flush trim bit and my trim router to make both profiles equal. I used this outer basically like a template, because I really wasn't sure about the top part yet. And as I sat there and looked at it with both of them together, and I got out the tape measure, you know, did my measurements, how far down, how far wide, and got my WD-40 can, put the little curves. That's when I decided just to go ahead and cut both of them at once. To me, in my mind, it wasn't as critical because I didn't have any shelves or anything. So the only thing I had to do was I couldn't get the sander in the bottom part here to get this little radius. So that's when my spindle sander came in handy. Brought it out and just sanded this little inner curve here. Once that was smooth, I was done. That's why I did it that way. Now that I am finally at the point where I can assemble this, I want to paint this prior to assembly. Many people will just assemble it and then paint it. I didn't want to try to get in this little area 3 inches and try to paint the shelves and get in there. It's just, didn't want that. So I chose to tape off every dado slot, and the shelves I taped off 1/4 inch of each end. So that way, when it comes time to assemble, I have wood on wood so I can glue it, assemble it, put me some nails in, and all I have to do is go in and just paint the corners on all the shelves. It makes it much more simple. Just blend it in that way and it's easy. I don't have to paint the whole shelf, just a little edge on the corners of every joint. So that's why I did that. Next step, paint and assembly. Now that I have this thing finally assembled, give it a quick sand, sanding all the dado points here, and give the side a quick little sanding. Now I can mix up some of the wood filler and patch all the nail holes and patch the joints here. So if there is a crack at all, it's a tight fit, but there still may be a little bit of a line, a little bit of a crack, fill that in so when I paint, it blends in phenomenally. You won't even see it. It looks like it's just all one piece. What I use is Goodfella filler, or filla. I feel like I'm talking with the East Coast accent. Goodfella. Go get my car, go get a filla. I am very impressed with this stuff so far. I got a couple of bags, different blends. This one here is natural. Got 2 other ones, one for lighter wood, one for darker wood. But I'm very impressed with this, and I think I just might end up doing a review on this somewhere down the line. Not yet, still working with it, so once I feel confident enough to give an unbiased opinion, I'll do a review on that. So I'm going to mix a little bit of my filla, Patch all the nail holes, patch the little joints here, then give it one final sanding once that is dry. Paint all the little joints here, blend that in. Then I can move on to the next step, mounting the backboard on here. Normally I would put a rabbet here and set this, but since I was limited on wood, I didn't really have enough wood to do what I wanted to do. As you saw earlier, I had to butt 2 pieces up just to make one side. So I was kind of basically cutting corners, which I would not normally do. So I mounted the backboard on the back, glue and nailed it, got my flush trim bit and my trim router, flush trimmed the sides so it's nice and smooth. Them all mounted, and I had to actually change this. Luckily I didn't drill it yet, but I had it too far down, couldn't even get in here to grab the battery. That's my biggest battery, so I would suggest, there you go, when you're doing this, make sure you got enough room so you can get in and grab your batteries. One thing I have to do, I'm going to route all the wires down and around, and I'm going to drill a hole 1.1 inches so I can feed all the wires through, and my little USB charger will fit right here. And you won't, it actually kind of cover the hole, you won't be able to see it. It'll be right behind this, so everything be nice and clean. And I'll get a little wire loom or maybe zip tie for now, run all the cords down along the side, and I'll plug them all underneath on the bottom down there. So I'm going to drill this out real quick, and then I'm going to go to the table saw, find what wood I'm going to use, see what I have left over, and make me a couple cleats for this to mount onto shelving unit. just thought I'd kind of bring you up to speed here. I'm finalizing this. I took the cap off and put screws into the bottom to hold this, so this is not going anywhere. Unfortunately, right here, I'll set it right there. My USB-C, yeah, it just fell off again. Little charging port there isn't sticking, so I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm going to leave a little extra on the cord, so at least it will set there for now until I figure out how I get it to stick. Maybe it's just too cold. Maybe I'll try some hot glue. I don't know yet. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do the best I can to route all these down. Just figure out how I want to do this and zip them together. There we have it. Again, I don't know. I'm just going to stick that there. Sweet. Perfect. I don't want to shut it because I don't have the front yet. That actually fits perfect. I'll run this up to an outlet up there so I'm out of the way so I don't have the cords on the ground. And that way I just have to go underneath here, turn it on and off. Quarter cable, and then my big 8 amp hour, I gotta charge that, make sure it's all done, and there we go. And I can plug in my speaker, I can plug in my phone, I can plug in my tablet, I can set up here to charge it. So I'm good to go. I got everything I need right there. I'm liking that a lot. So now, drawer is done. We wanna focus on the front here. And we're going to make our drawer front. Now the last thing I want to discuss is how I came up with the design, this profile for my drawer front. To explain that, I'm going to grab a vintage chalkboard. It just seems weird. And I'm going to attempt to sadly draw and show you basically how I came up with this design. Now this isn't to scale, but give you an idea. This is, just use this as an example, this is the face front, and this is sitting that way. They're not on the same level, but I wanted this bigger so you can see what I mean by putting in the angles. Basically what I did was, on the face of the drawer front, from this end to this end, and I got my middle. From that point on either side, I went 1.5 inches, because I wanted a 3-inch reveal or a 3-inch step down on the front. So if this is the center of that, basically on either side, 1.5 inches, that's 3 inches right there. This is 3/4 inch thick material. That center, I'm probably about right there. I went from the back over 3/8 inch. And that's where I wanted that angle to start to go up to this. Now you can, without making that little step down, you can just angle that and cut it right there and be done with it. But it would be flat, then transition right into the angle. I didn't want that. I wanted more of a reveal. I wanted this front part to stand out. So I chose to put basically a reveal, a little step down from the front down before I transitioned into that angle. How I achieved that, the distance from here to here, whatever that measurement is, depending on how big of a drawer front you are making, I used this measurement to set my fence. So let's just say this was 2 inches, I set my fence at 2 inches. With a scrap piece of wood, I lowered the blade down, very minimal, ran a piece of scrap through, measured the depth. I wanted my step down 1/8 of an inch. So I'd raise the blade up, check the depth till I got to that desired depth of 1/8 of an inch. So with that 2-inch measurement, I ran this edge through, and then I ran that edge through. Then I turned it on edge and ran both ends through. So I had this large hashtag on the face of my drawer front. So looking at it from the end, I basically had a 1/8 of an inch dado like this on all 4 edges. Taking that 3/8 of an inch mark now, I drew from here up to the very corner of that dado. So we're not going up here and making a smooth transition. We're actually stepping it down, and I have an 1/8 of an inch flat area before I actually start the transition for my angle. That way it steps down, not at the very corner, but I have a little flat area before it transitions down. Gives it that little extra look. How I achieved that was, as you saw, I had my angle finder. I set it on here, got close to that angle, set my saw blade, and I would go, instead of setting this at 3/8 of an inch, I set my fence maybe about a 1/2 inch or a little more than 1/2 inch, and I just cut into the side of my drawer front, let's say maybe like that, just to check if I was at the same angle. If I was too much, I would bring it up and just run it through again until I brought that angle up until it was parallel with that mark. So if I was like that, bringing it up little by little, run through, just shaving this off till I got to the point where it looked parallel. Doesn't have to be perfect, just got to be close. Once I achieved that, then I set my fence at 3/8 of an inch, this distance here, ran it through just a little bit and double checked, make sure I was on my line close enough. And then I didn't do the whole cut at once. I cut maybe about 1 inch of it first, ran it through all 4 sides, raised it up about another inch, ran all 4 sides through, and then I would raise it up close to that, and I would inch it up till it just maybe broke through this side part here, and I was just right at that corner. And then I ran all 4 sides through, so I had this angled now, and that was my drawer face. So all I had was my little reveal, 2 inches all the way around. This was a 1/8 of an inch higher than the angle part, so I went from this, step down 1/8 of an inch, had flat area before it angled down to the edge here. That's how I came up with this profile. It gives it a little more of a custom look. It just adds to it. Now, doing something like this is very dangerous. So I want you to be forewarned now. Certain cuts you have to take off your guard on your table saw. I personally keep my guard on. There's so many people out there that take that off. I don't, and I won't, except for certain cuts. You watch any of the videos out there, people getting hurt, losing fingers, getting mangled hands, it's because they don't have the guard on. Now, if the guard was on, ran a piece through, and some of them tired, weren't thinking, reached over like this and grabbed the piece, and their hand was right over that blade. Well, if that guard was on there, that would prevent that. So I'm just saying, the guard is on there for a reason. You don't need a saw stop technology. You have safety equipment that comes with your table saw. Utilize it. I'd say 90+% accidents are prevented with that guard on there. Don't be stupid. Keep the guard on, keep yourself safe. With that, understandably, there are certain cuts you can't have it on, you have to take it off. Point in case, this. If you have a Harvey or any of the other table saws and they have a high-low fence, at least you have the high portion of the factory fence to have more area to hold your project against. Better yet though, just like a jig you make to cut tenons on your table saw, have a jig set up that you can clamp your drawer front to, hold it there and just run it through, then you're completely safe. Just one drawer, I was going to build a jig for one. If I was building a shop full of cabinets and if I needed 40 or 50 drawer fronts done, yeah, I'd be building a jig. Because after that many, I might be getting tired, I might get stupid and pull something and lose a couple of fingers, and I'm not going to do that. One drawer, I'm not going to go through the task of building a jig if I'm only going to use it once and it may sit there for a year or two. Preferably, build a jig that you can hold tenons on, you can hold drawers on, more of a universal type of jig, that you can hold a tall piece of stock on to run it through your table saw. That is your best bet. I'm just warning you ahead of time, be safe. Just because I did it doesn't mean you should do it. If I do something, that's all on me. Never say never. Never say never. With that, let's get back to the video and we can complete this build. I have actually just a little like 1/8 inch piece or close to 1/8 inch cut off from one of my cutting boards. I'm going to use that as a spacer in back so that the drawer doesn't go all the way back in there, I'm hoping. So let's see how far it goes back. Okay, perfect. Just sticks out a little. So that means I can just set this up here. Right way, yeah. I can set that on there. And I get a piece of wood or something to use so it stays level. Then I'm going to put some pinners around, probably one there and 2 or 3 on top and bottom and here. And that way I can pull the drawer out and then screw from behind a couple screws on either end here. So I'm going to drill a couple holes and then we're going to set that up there and line it up and tack it in and see if I can pull it out without it coming off. Now I have put me some blocks under here so I can close this back as far as it goes. I can set this on here now and it won't fall down. So it's level with the bottom, very nice with the top. So all I'm going to do is take a piece of wood, make sure I'm flat to the sides. Make sure I'm good on this side because I cut it just perfect. I like that. Very good. So now I'll take my pinner, hopefully it's going to hold it enough. I'll just put a couple of pins through there. But my main thing is I hope it'll hold enough. Oh yes. I'll have to take these out. I don't need these on here no more. All right. Cool. My main thing is I can grab it now on the inside. Oh my gosh. Yep, my table saw is in the way. I'm going to have to take this off and go to the next slot on here. Yikes. Oh well. Let me let me move this and we'll be back. I've been fine-tuning this because when I went to take these out so I could put the screws in, it's a little snug and some of them have like little black lines from the side here. So I took this little 1/8 inch piece of cherry that I have for my cutting boards, put the sandpaper around it, and I went around on the sides. I cleaned out the dados a little bit, and I'm just taking each one of the dividers, and basically I'm just sanding, about 3/8 of an inch the edge here, and I lift it up and take round over the edge just to clean it up a bit, like that. And then I just check the fit. Sometimes I have to just shave the end a little bit. And I just check, see if it slides in or not. If it's a little too tight, I just do a little bit more. See, that's perfect. Excellent. A little snug at the bottom down there. Uh-oh. Oh, I know what happened. It must have got stuck. That's why this corner's out. So I bet this fits in there. I'll have to get a chisel. Yep. I have to get a chisel. Part of that got stuck down in there. Just leave this one in there. It's cool. So this one will go in here. Excellent. See how it just slides in? That's what I want. Perfect. There we go. So I said just fine tuning it a little bit. Door pull is on. So now we can finally put this in there. If it works, we can call it complete. It is actually finally done, and it works. Take my speaker down so I listen to my music through there. So I got batteries charging right now. They're charging, that's plugged in. And I had to put another layer of two-way tape on it, because the two-way tape, not like it has a lip on it, but it kind of was inset, so it wasn't touching the surface. So I put another layer on, and now it sticks, so that's good. Stay in there now. All my battery chargers are there. I can put batteries up here as need be, put them in the charger, and then put them in here. And my drawer right there, get my batteries, slides in. I am happy. That is a big thing done. I didn't want to build it, but I kind of had no choice. So now all my tools are organized, set here. Batteries are in here. Chargers are there. Now I can clean out this whole shelf here, reorganize with some of this other stuff I have sitting here, can go on there now. Main thing to take away from this is, if you're new to woodworking, you're starting to gather up a few tools, cut this section out, bring this up here, and you have a nice little shelf for 4 tools. Mine isn't just straight square. I have some form to it. I like how this came out. Any questions, please hit the comment section below. I always keep an eye on and respond. If you really want to know more, email me direct. We can go in depth if need be. So never fear, reach out. There is never a dumb question. We're all learning together, little by little. It never ends. Thank you so much for watching. Be blessed. Take back your shack. Build it for your sanity. I got 4 videos I'm working on, so I got to get in the house. No more projects for the next couple of days. I got to strictly work on videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you're not missing anything I want to put out. See you next video.